Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today is Sunday, October 14th, 2018. We're about halfway through the month of October, so we're going to do a 2018 Senate election prediction. So a lot has happened since the beginning of the month with Kavanaugh and a number of other factors that have entered the races. And again, with half the month left to go, there should be some October surprises that should come out, so there's a reason why I'm doing this right now. We currently have 35 contested races, which doesn't really benefit the Democratic Party, if I'm being completely honest with you. Looking at a number of these states that Donald Trump won in back in 2016 that currently have Democratic incumbents up for re-election. States like Florida, Indiana, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, notably West Virginia, Montana, North Dakota, and currently the GOP has one state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016 that currently has a Republican incumbent, and that is the state of Nevada. So the former map that I had before I made this one, I'm making this one today, was 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. Now, these numbers probably aren't going to fluctuate much, especially looking at the map we have now. Not many races are going to drastically change in the favor of one political party over the other, but there will be minor and sometimes major race changes that do have just slight tilts over one side to the other. So this is the current composition of the United States Senate. We currently have 49 Democrats and 51 Republicans. The reason why there is green here means that there's an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party. In this case, we have two, one from Vermont and Bernie Sanders, and then one from Maine, Angus King, both of which who are up in 2018, and they both are independents who caucus with the Democratic Party. So if we're being technical, two independents, 47 Democrats, and 51 Republicans. But right now, the Republicans don't really need that one extra seat. They currently have the vice president who is a Republican who would hand over the majority to the GOP at a 50-50 tie in terms of composition. So that 51 is just a, without VP, Mike Pence, majority in the United States Senate. But we're going to see how this map plays out in the 2018 elections, especially with a number of contested races up at this point in time. We're going to start ahead and characterize all these safe Democratic states. States like Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, these are states that are pretty solid for the Democratic Party in terms of the Democratic Party's re-election bids there for the incumbents or sometimes non-incumbents. I don't think there's any races that the incumbent Democrat is not necessarily, a non-incumbent Democrat is in a safe state. Right now, we look at a state like Virginia, and that is a state that was a swing state in 2016. I don't think this needs much clarification, but Tim Kaine is from that state. He's pretty popular. Corey Stewart doesn't really have a chance in that state. I'm moving this from likely Democratic to now safe Democratic. So very interesting seeing the numbers there, but that one has moved in the favor of the Democratic Party and shifted towards their way. Looking at a couple of other states like Michigan and Minnesota, and right now I'm going to characterize those races as safe for the Democratic Party. Now, Michigan before was a likely Democratic seat. I'm now comfortable enough putting that with the state of Minnesota in the safe Democratic column. Looking at data that's leading into the election season, Debbie Stabenow leads by 9% in a recent poll from the state of Michigan, but other polls do contradict those numbers. I think that one could be an outlier, especially since every single poll has shown otherwise, showing her leading by double digits. So I think at the end of the day, this race could move into the safe column for the Democratic Party. As for the state of Pennsylvania, another race that I think could move to the Democratic Party's favor from likely Democratic to safe Democratic. Looking at the numbers we see now, doesn't look too good for the Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania and Michigan both moving from likely Democratic to safe Democratic. Again, good for the Democratic Party, putting them at a total of 38 seats. Another race that is moving from likely Democratic to safe Democratic is the state of New Mexico. At this point in time, looking at the state of New Mexico, not too good for the Republicans there, considering Gary Johnson is running. The GOP is not withdrawing their candidate. Gary Johnson is not withdrawing his candidacy. And even when there was just one GOP candidate, the Democrat was winning by considerable amounts. Looking at the number of vote splitters in the state of New Mexico, sure, they will take away, I'm referring to Gary Johnson when I say they will take voters away from the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party has a pretty solid base in the state of New Mexico. I am betting that Martin Heinrich wins by a plurality, but I think he will win by double digits, so over 15%, which is why I've characterized it as a safe state for the Democratic Party. It's just very interesting seeing the results from those states and seeing the candidates there that you really wouldn't expect to run in any other type of election year than this one. So when we're looking at the numbers, we have another race to move from likely Democratic to safe Democratic, and it is another state that's near the Rust Belt. That is the state of Ohio. Now, Sherrod Brown has pretty much solidified his lead leading into the election. We have less than 25 days in the 2018 election season, and right now he leads by double digits, and he leads larger in states like Ohio than the Democrats do in Wisconsin, or the Democrats do in a Clinton state in 2016, Nevada. So when we look at Ohio's background, 2016 was surprisingly uncontested for the Senate race, and it wasn't too contested in the presidential election, going to Trump by 8%. Now we're looking at 2018, and somehow this race has moved from being contested before, just as 2016 was for the Senate race, and then moving into a more spiral into a safe column for whichever political party was leading at the beginning. So right now, looking at this state has now moved into the safe column for the Democratic Party. But now we can move into the states that are currently safe for the GOP. States like Wyoming are pretty safe for the GOP, Utah, Mississippi, and right now the state of Nebraska, I'm moving from likely GOP to safe GOP. Yes, Jane Ray, I believe Raybould, yes. So Raybould is a pretty good candidate, to be completely honest with you. There's a reason why this race is a little bit more contested and was at some point a likely state, even though it is one of the more conservative states in the nation. Looking at the state itself, it is going to be pretty contested compared to where it should be. I think that the margin could be nearing 15% when it really should be 30, 33 for a Republican incumbent. But again, I don't think it has to do with the Democratic wave year because, again, this is the state of Nebraska. You don't expect Democrats to do very well there. I think it just could be Deb Fischer's not really, I guess, performing well. I mean, this is a Republican's race to lose. These are Republican states. If a Republican is losing here, it's their fault. It's not the fact that the Democrat is doing phenomenal. Sure, that's there, like in the state of Alabama, but that was, for example, in Alabama, Roy Moore's race to lose. In Nebraska, it could be Deb Fischer's race to lose, but it probably isn't going to be. So I'm moving this one from likely GOP to safe GOP, thinking it could narrowly nudge over that 15% mark, but it is going to be a little bit more contested than before. There was a possibility in 538 when Nebraska could have gone to the Democrat by 0.1%, whereas the Republican, on average, is expected to win by 10%. But the numbers have shifted in the favor of the GOP, and as did this map. So we currently have 46 Republicans that are safe and 40 Democrats that are safe. So the map has definitely leveled out compared to where it was before. Compare the numbers now here to the map we're seeing here. And there are some states that will be likely for the Democratic Party. Minnesota special election, the state of Wisconsin, the state of New Jersey, and the state of West Virginia. Looking at those four states that I just characterized, number one, Minnesota, that special election has since moved to plus 15 for Tina Smith. It is no longer plus 7, plus 8, plus 9, but now in the double digits. It actually could end up in the safe column by 2018, but for right now, until future data concludes with this, we're going to actually just characterize this one as a likely Democratic state. And looking at the state of Wisconsin right now, Tammy Baldwin, yes, is doing very well. I just don't think it's enough to push her into the safe column. As for the state of New Jersey, Bob Menendez definitely has recouped a number of voters. In fact, maybe they never left him and the polls were just incorrect. So he's gone from plus 2 to plus 11 in about a week. And if that trend continues, yes, it could move into the safe column, but I'm thinking a plus 8, plus 9% win is what's expected at the end of 2018. And as for the state of West Virginia, a poll taken before Kavanaugh's confirmation showed Manchin leading by 18% if he votes for Kavanaugh, and then plus 2% if he does not. So regardless of how that turned out, he was expected to win this race. So now that I've moved it into the likely column, was in the likely column a week ago, that's not too unexpected, to be completely honest with you. Joe Manchin is pretty popular. His approval rating has dropped very narrowly compared to where it was in the first quarter, the second quarter, and now we're entering the third quarter. And I'm actually going to be doing an analysis video in a couple of videos coming up pretty soon, but right now, those states go in the favor of the Democratic Party. As for states that are going to be likely for the GOP, only the Mississippi special election. Right now, when we're looking at the data there, it looks pretty likely, I guess you could say, playing words there, but it looks pretty likely the GOP is going to win this race by around 10 to 15%, with an incumbent on the top of the ticket and then going into a runoff type primary election. It will end up with a Democrat versus a Republican. However, I think that this margin could be narrowed down just with the extended Democratic turnout, but it all depends on what happens on election day. So that's going to be not a close race to watch, but just something interesting to keep in the back of your head if this one moves past the November election date. So we have 44 Democrats, 47 Republicans. We currently have 9 contested races. I was considering moving North Dakota from leaning GOP into the likely column. And in fact, I may just do it by the end of this video. I'm going to leave that one as a purely contested race because I'm having a little bit more regrets in terms of how I've characterized this race in the past. I did think at a point Heidi Heitkamp could win, but now it's getting very, very, very good for the GOP. I mean, very good for the GOP. And yes, it's exactly what we saw in 2012, but these circumstances are a little bit different. We don't have a Democratic incumbent president. This isn't a presidential election year. And even though Democrats don't really turn out much in states like North Dakota, they definitely did make an impact. And looking at 2018, sure, it's a Democratic wave year, but what good does that do you in a solid GOP state in presidential elections. It really doesn't do you any good. So North Dakota, we're going to come back to. There's not too much to characterize in a couple of other of these races. I mean, these are swing state races, but North Dakota is probably one of those more shocker states, considering how solid it is for the GOP compared to other states that are currently holding re-election bids for the GOP incumbent. States like Nevada, Texas, and Tennessee, which may be more in favor of the Democrats than a state like North Dakota, which has an incumbent. So when we're characterizing races, we're going to go ahead and start with the states that are currently leaning for the GOP. That is the state of Texas. The state of Texas alone, actually not alone, the state of Tennessee as well, will move into the leaning GOP column. Tennessee is another state I think could have moved in the likely GOP column, but we're just going to need a little bit more data from that race, that if it does show double digits or even +5 or more, I will move that race into the likely column. And there's a number of other factors. It's not just polling data, but we're seeing a sudden shift in terms of the voting basis in the state of Tennessee that is not benefiting Phil Bredesen whatsoever. As for the state of Texas, this one has been pretty much always consistent in terms of leaning in favor of the GOP, and it's exactly what we're seeing here. So 49 Republicans, 44 Democrats. When looking at a couple of these races, they are going to characterize differently than they were before. So every single state you see on your map, except for North Dakota, will be characterized as a tilt state, and you're going to see exactly where they're going to be characterized in favor of which political party and why. So Indiana and the state of Missouri are both going to be characterized as tilt Democratic states. These are two states the Democrats definitely think they can hold on to because the GOP is actually wasting money in states like Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. These are states I say wasting money in because these races are very, very contested, and it all comes down to the candidates. It's not just about how the national view on the president, on the GOP, on the Democratic Party is viewed, because it comes down to these individual candidates. We now have 49 Republicans and 46 Democrats. This is going to be a very contested Senate election race. So when we look at these states, the GOP definitely focusing a lot on their money here. If they win, it's not wasted money, but if they lose, it is wasted money. So they could have had opportunities to pick up states like Missouri and Indiana, but right now I'm characterizing those races as tilt Democratic states. For the state of Florida, I'm going to now move this one into the tilt Democratic column from the leaning Democratic column. It is shifted in favor of the GOP, again, moving down one shade of color for the Democratic Party. But still, I think that with the governor's race, that's going to be mentioned a lot in the state of Florida. I think it could narrowly push Bill Nelson over the top with a different type of candidate going up for this election. But again, it all comes down to what we see later in October, if there's any October surprises. Again, the October surprises, if there are any. So it definitely comes down to what we're seeing at the end of the campaign season, because it's exactly what we saw in 2016 when Florida was supposed to go to Hillary Clinton, and then the last week happened, and then Donald Trump was able to narrowly edge out that state. So we currently have 4 contested races, 49 Republicans, and now we're going to characterize 3 races in the favor of the Democratic Party: Montana, Nevada, and Arizona. All 3 races that I've moved from leaning Democratic to tilt Democratic. Montana has no new data after Manchin. Tester voted against Kavanaugh. So if that doesn't necessarily agree with what Montana voters are supporting, it really isn't going to help him come this election. And again, in Nevada and Arizona, these are races that have narrowed down since the last time making the video. Dean Heller now leading by 2% in the state of Nevada. McSally leading by +6% in the most recent poll from the state of Arizona. No new data from Montana, but the shift probably will be there once we see new data. So right now, looking at these 3 races, they have moved all in the favor of the GOP, but still land in the Democratic column. Now, looking at the state of North Dakota, we are going to characterize this race is going to be pretty bad for Heidi Heitkamp. At this point in time, I think the race could narrow down as it did in 2012. Unfortunately for her, this map is not benefiting her, especially looking at her popularity, number one, looking at her vote against Kavanaugh, and looking at a number of other factors with Kevin Cramer. It's probably not going to be a repeat of 2012. So when we're looking at the 2018 map, Heidi Heitkamp probably is going to be that first Democratic incumbent to go. The Democrats do pick up 1 seat, but again, looking at these states, Florida, Missouri, Indiana, Arizona, Nevada, and Montana could all go the other way. These are all races that are currently characterized as tilt Democratic states, which means that I expect them to be less than 1 to 2%, so less than that, possibly 0.3%, depending on how close the races get. So looking at the rest of the map itself, Tennessee, Texas, and North Dakota are pretty much the only areas where the Democrats could make it vulnerable. But right now, looking at this map, it does not benefit the Democrats whatsoever. And looking at these margins, they could in fact shift over in the favor of the Republicans by the end of next week. So this is the map we have now compared to the map before. Again, don't just look at that pure solid color. Look at the margins, because the margins are everything. Again, margin of errors definitely exist in polling data. So polling may not be necessarily incorrect, and this prediction may not necessarily be incorrect if you look at how close the races are characterized now compared to where they should be in the favor of either political party. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.